The author of this recipe was Mrs. Isabella Beeton, who was a sort of Victorian-era Martha Stewart. She was a writer and editor, best known for her work entitled Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management. She published this at the age of 25 in 1861. I wanted to try this recipe because I happen to grow a type of heirloom bean called the Kentucky Wonder Bean, which was developed just 3 years after the first publication of Mrs. Beeton's book. And though Mrs. Beeton is an English woman preparing these beans in a French style, these beans are actually a distinctly Native American food because they are native to the Americas, being grown in Mexico, Central, and South America for thousands of years before European colonizers arrived. The recipe is simple, requiring only the beans, a lemon. The recipe originally calls for butter, but I'm dairy-free and must use margarine for allergy reasons, and some simple seasoning of black pepper and sea salt. The recipe seems really quite modern as we often use lemon and butter to dress vegetables today. However, in the Victorian era, this combination of flavors was really quite novel. There was a dessert spread called lemon butter, which was lemon and butter prepared with sugar. That was really all of the rage. Right now I'm just putting on my apron and preparing myself to get down to the business of chopping and getting everything prepared to cook. I have rinsed the beans, grabbed a small paring knife, and a dish of water with some salt dissolved into it. Now I can begin step 1 of the recipe, which calls to cut each bean into 4 to 6 pieces according to size, cutting them lengthways in a slanting direction, and as they are cut, put them into cold water with a small quantity of salt dissolved in it. So, I have picked some rather young beans, so I am only cutting them into 2, as they don't need to be much smaller than this. You can prepare them however you like. If you would rather have smaller pieces, by all means cut them up a little smaller. However, I find that these will not hold well if I'm cutting them into thinner strips than this. I have finished preparing the beans, cutting them into fine, small strips and allowing them to soak in the water. The recipe calls for 4 cups, but I have just approximated this amount. I'm just stirring them up a bit to make sure that they've all become at least somewhat submerged in the salt water. I have cleaned off my cutting board, and now I can begin to prepare the lemon to juice it. The recipe calls for the juice of half of 1 large lemon. The recipe also calls for 3 ounces of butter, which equates to 6 tablespoons. Now that I have everything prepared, I will begin following the rest of the steps and begin cooking the beans. They read as follows. Step number 2, measure 1/2 gallon water into a saucepan and bring to a boil over high heat. 3, put in the beans, keep them boiling quickly with the lid uncovered and be careful that they do not get smoked. 4, when tender, which may be ascertained by their sinking to the bottom of the saucepan, take them up, throw them into a colander. 5, once drained, put them into a stew pan and shake over the fire, medium heat, to dry away the moisture from the beans. 6, when quite dry and hot, add the butter, salt, pepper, and lemon juice. Keep moving the stew pan without using a spoon, as that would break the beans. When the butter is melted and all is thoroughly hot, serve. I, of course, do not have a fire to cook over. I used a conventional stove. I boiled them according to the directions, and then I used a saucepan to heat them, melt the butter and the lemon. And now to try them out and give it a taste. They ended up turning out quite nicely. It's a lovely little dish that I wouldn't be surprised to find in a modern restaurant somewhere. In case you would like to try this recipe or any other of Mrs. Beeton's, I will leave a link to both the original version of her book and an additional one that was published closer to the Edwardian era in the late 1890s that shows a fascinating evolution in cooking techniques, I think, because towards the Edwardian they were getting away from using the age-old fire techniques and getting into using more modern cooking appliances. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.